Hello everyone, I'm Caroline and welcome to Christmas in July. Today I'm going to make 5 trees on a Christmas theme. That's a lot to pack in, so let's get on with it. But don't forget at the end of the video to let me know which one you think was your favourite. This is going to be a topiary effect tree. I've got this bowl, it's actually designed to just hang. You can see the little hanger on there. And you can see the little bit of twine. I'm going to pull that out. And I've got a flower pot. I chose this flower pot because it's slightly aged. I didn't want to buy a new one. I wanted it to be a little bit aged without having to falsely age it. And I think that looks very nice. And I've got this, which is the inside of a craft ribbon spool. And a stick. It's actually a bit of driftwood, which I've cut to the right length. So let's start assembling this. First thing I'm going to do is take this. Now this is slightly too big for the pot, which is my intention. So it'll only go in that far. But then if I give it an extra push, look how firmly that sits. Perfect. So now I'm going to get my piece of wood and poke that, and that is too big again. Suddenly it's much more firm that way. But that doesn't look very pretty, does it? We need something in here, and I've got some fur. So I'm going to chop a little hole in the top of this so that we can fit it over the stick. I'm actually going to cut across rather than a hole. Pop it over, slide it down. And now I can see roughly where I want to cut this. I didn't want to cut too much off, but I want plenty in there. I don't want it to just be covering the cardboard. I want it to look nice and ripply. I'm going to pop a little bit of hot glue now to hold that in place so that it doesn't go wandering. So now I'm going to find where I pulled the tag off this, which is easier said than done. Got it. And now I'm going to cover the top of this with hot glue and pop this into place. Ooh, it's very close to the camera now. So now in the theme of Christmas, I'm going to put some ivy because the holly and the ivy is a famous song. I thought if we put holly and ivy on this, it'll look really pretty. And it's just a matter of a little bit of hot glue and attaching this to the stick. Put your pot on something if it keeps rolling away. I love this sort of craft that's easy. Anybody can do it. And your friends will be really impressed and assume that you bought this from a very high-end shop. When you were making this, you may decide you want to put some plaster of Paris or some cement in the bottom here to hold this really firmly. I'm not, because I always like to, after a few years, change up anything like this that I've made and just make it slightly different so I can take this apart, reassemble it, do what I want with it. I'm going to put some holly on the front of the pot. That way then the holly and the ivy work well together and also ties the colouring of the reds and greens here coming down onto the pot, and it makes it look like a hole, not like you've just stuck something into a pot because you didn't have anything else available. It looks very coordinated. Pick your favourite part of the decoration you've got at the top. I like this bit as the front, and then I'm just going to glue my holly on. And look at that, that was fairly quick, it was fairly easy and looks absolutely gorgeous. Let's have a look what this looks like on display. this is a wooden Christmas tree made from a piece of pallet wood that I found on the beach, and this is just an old offcut of wood that I found in our shed. So I'm going to make a Christmas tree, and the first thing to do is to measure half of the width of your plank. Now my plank is about 9.5 centimetres, so I've marked this off at 4 3/4 centimetres with a dot. So now I'm going to come down from that little dot at the top to the side as far as I can risk without falling off the end of my ruler. I go to about there, and now I'm going to measure from the bottom up, and that is 11 centimetres, so 11 centimetres up, and mark this side. It really is best to do this with a pencil. I picked up my pen, it was the first thing that's come to hand, and I shouldn't have done it. Right, so now I'm going to draw a line from that top dot to the side dot with the pencil, and back the other way. Like that, and then across the bottom, joining the 2 dots. So again, measuring the base, so that's 9.5 centimetres. So I take 3 centimetres off that. Oops, very lumpy on this wood, which gives me 6.5 centimetres. Divide that by 2 gives me 3 1/4 centimetres. So I need to measure in 3 1/4 centimetres. Put a line, and from this side 3 1/4 centimetres, and that way I know my trunk will be in the middle and near enough. I'm not the world's greatest measurer. And then make sure your line is straight, which I can do by putting my ruler level with the bottom, and mark my trunk. So now I'm going to put a whitewash all over this, which is just some white acrylic paint mixed in with water. So it's quite watery. I don't want it to be very white, just want it to be looking a little bit limed, like a lime oak, even though it's actually only cheap pine. One little tip, I got various stirrers. As you can see, I'm stirring some green, so I keep these skewers, and then if ever I'm stirring green, I use this end, red that end, white. I've just started this one again now to get me a new one. So if you keep an assortment of different colour ended sticks near your desk, and then when you're working, you can just use the right colour so you don't stain. Like, I wouldn't want to mix this with a red ended stirrer, and this saves you throwing your old stirrers away. This is a nice easy job, and it's very quick as well, because it doesn't take long to dry. Then paint the whole of your plank. I'm going to do the front, sides, top and back. You can paint this a solid white. If you're going to paint it a solid white, I would really recommend that you draw your pencil lines in after. I'll be able to see these through the paint, but if it's solid white, you wouldn't be able to see them. And then you'd have to do the whole thing again. And now I'm going to coat the base, but I'm not going to coat the bottom. Don't need to, you can if you want to. If you want to save on your paint, or if you want to save time, don't worry about painting the bottom, because it'll be in the bottom and nobody's going to see it. If you've got a steady hand, which I really haven't, then you don't need to mask off the tree. I certainly do. So I've added some talcum powder to some acrylic paint and a little bit of water, which effectively makes a sort of chalk paint. Look, I'm not sure of the exact measurements. I'd say about 1/3 talc, 2/3 acrylic paint, and a spludge of water, and then paint the tree. I'm trying to get a little bit of a country look, so I'm doing mine a little thinner so that you can see the grain of the wood, and some of the white is showing through as well, which I think looks really lovely. And now off with the washi tape. Now, as is always the way, whenever I'm doing anything like this, I end up running out of something last minute. So I don't have any brown acrylic, so I'm going to try using some watercolour. Now, this is a complete experiment, so it could go badly wrong. And I think the watercolour has worked fine. So there you go, hot off the press. If you want to do this and you haven't got the right colour acrylic, then you can use some watercolour. And off with washi tape. Oh dear, I spluttered a bit there. The watercolour has run very badly, so I'm just going to try straightening this edge back up. I don't know if I can, but we'll give it a try. That's a bit better, but this is a bit of an issue. That's something I love about craft. Nothing's ever a failure, it's just a learning process. I now know I can use watercolour, but it bleeds like mad under washi tape when used on wood. I want to put a star at the top, but this glitzy yellow one is really not going to do the job, so I'm going to paint it. Add a little bit of ink just around the edges, make it stand out a little bit. And then glue this in place, sticking over the top. I think it looks lovely sticking out like that. If you want to, you could put some brown all around the edges of this to distress it a little, make it a little bit old and aged, but I like it like this. Now it needs to be attached to the bottom block, so I picked my favourite side. That one's a little bit dark, even though I sanded it, the dirt's gone right in, so I'm going to use this side, which is still looking a bit rustic. Oops, a bit of thick paint there, but I don't mind. So the first thing to do is to get your tumbling blocks and glue those level with the bottom of this piece of wood. Make sure your tree's the right way up. I know because my star's that end, but it is easy to make those little mistakes. I know, I'm always making them. Lots of hot glue on there and nice and level with the bottom. I've put a little mark roughly halfway just to make it a bit easier to judge where the middle is. You can measure it if you're an accurate person. I'm not. I'm a give it a go, do the best you can type person. I hate measuring. And then pop this into place centrally on your wooden block. I got this piece of fabric. I think it looks lovely to go with this style, this country style. So I'm going to tie a little double loop bow. Although I like flamboyant bows, not on this style. I don't think it looks right. So I've got a nice simple looking bow. I'm not even going to dovetail the bottoms of these. I'm just going to chop them off straight and just pull a few threads out to fray the ends. Look at the colour on my fingers. Make sure all your fabric's facing the right way and then glue it at the bottom of the tree. And look at that for a farmhouse style Christmas tree. Isn't that gorgeous? It's almost shaker style, isn't it? I suppose you could call it shaker style too. I love it, so let's have a look what this looks like up on my display. This craft is going to be using this weird loofah type thing. It's like a giant bottle brush with handles on. I've already cut this end to see if I could find a pliers that was strong enough to cut it. Now if you can't get hold of one of these, you can just use bottle brushes and you'll be fine. It is quite a challenge to cut this wire. You need a really good wire cutters. And the extra help of metal fatigue. So once you can't cut it any further, keep wiggling the end and eventually the metal will just snap off. I've got a few different pieces of wood here that I've got some holes drilled in, so I'm going to turn those into the trunks for trees. I've even got this that I may make some sort of tree diorama on, so it's a matter of deciding how tall I want them to be. I think I'll do an assortment. I'll start with one this length and then work from there. And as you'll see, every time you cut, you get lots of fibres. Oh, that counts as a full workout doing that. So I've got all those bits there and I'm just going to try clearing some of these bits away. What a mess. So now choose a nice piece of wood that you've drilled a hole in with a nicely sized piece of brush that you think will go well. I think on this one I'll go for one about that size. No, I won't. I think I'll go for a tall one. Why not? Crimp both ends of your wire together, otherwise it'll keep shedding. And then you just want to be cutting at an angle to make it look a bit of a tree shape. Poke some hot glue in the hole. Poke your bottom of your bottle brush in like that. And because you've got all this bit sticking up, I'm just going to put a little decoration. I've got this little piece of tangerine peel star. We'll glue that into place. More glue. And pop it in. Now that one is actually quite neat on the top. It seems to be a bit hit and miss. But I'm still going to put a little decoration on, I think. Popped a little glistening berry on the top of that one. I'll put a little Christmas bauble on the top of this one. So I take off the hanger, snip off the end, add a little bit of hot glue to the top of the tree and pop the little Christmas bauble on. Now isn't that cute? A few things to note when you're doing this. This is a very messy craft. There will be possibly some shedding even after they're glued into place, and you do need strong wrists and hands to actually get the bits of wire cut and twisted. I'm going to make these 4 trees into a little tree diorama. I've drilled some holes into a wood round. You can drill as many holes as you want to put trees in. So 4 trees aren't going to fit into this, so I'm just going to put 3 in. If you're enjoying this content or find it of any value, then please give me a thumbs up. That would be great. I'd really appreciate it. And why not subscribe to see more of my videos every time I put one out. I'm going to glue a pearl onto the top of each little tree. And now put a little strip of these half faux pearls on all around the edge of the piece of wood, starting at the back so that the join is at the back too. Isn't that gorgeous? And we've got one little bit left. So what are we going to do with that? We glue this little sprig of holly onto our last tree. Well, wasn't that fun? Let's have a look what these look like up on my display. On this large piece of paper, I'm going to try freehanding the quarter of a circle using the length of my arm. And then cut it out. And now we're going to create a cone using that quarter circle of cardboard and decide what sort of angle you want on your Christmas tree. I think for me about there. And now trim the bottom straight. I'm still using up my placemats. I got 5 for £1 and they're brilliant for lots of different projects. It doesn't take much effort to chop them apart, and look how much material you get from just one of these. So So I'm going to undo lots and lots of this now because we're going to use a lot of it on this Christmas tree. Now I'm going to glue this all the way around the tree. Now when I get back to the beginning, it's a bit noisy, I'm going to cut that end up at an angle to just make it a bit easier to go up to the next level. This is one of the more time-consuming glue gun crafts because you have to hold this in place for quite a while. It's so stiff it'll pop off otherwise, so you really need to make sure the glue has cooled sufficiently before you move on, especially at a difficult joint like this one. And now up to the next level. If you can't get hold of placemats like this that you can undo, then you can always plait some raffia, or you can use some nautical rope, you can plait some yarn, anything like that. As long as you get a thickness that's easy to work with. If it's too thin, it's going to take you forever. This time the jump up to the next level will be so much easier because you've already made a start on the layer underneath. And then you keep going on and on and on until you reach the top. And this is real fun to do because it's got wider raffia, so it goes much faster than just using thin twine. And it's so fulfilling to see the Christmas tree appear before your eyes. The last few turns are really tight if you're using this sort of plaited raffia. But when you get to the top, cut off at a slight angle and then squash all the top ends together to cover all of the cardboard. So now on your tree, you've got a choice. You can put some berries and foliage at the top. That would look really pretty. You can use a paler foliage. That would look very countryish, wouldn't it? You could tie some cinnamon sticks and put a sliced dried orange on. I think I'm going to use this heart. I think it really adds to the country effect of this tree. It's a piece of heart-shaped wood. I painted it white, put some buffalo check paper on it and just sanded the edges a little, stuck a button on, stuck a bow on, and now I'm going to put it on the top of my tree. Isn't that beautiful? Again, pick the best side of your tree. I quite like that side. And then I'm going to put a run of glue and pop it on the top of my tree. Again, there are more alternatives. You can put some decoration on this. You could put some lights on it. You could just add a few little pearls or a few little odd berries here and there. You could even put a little floral display on the front if you wanted to. But I like it the way it is. I think the simplicity adds to the effect. So let's have a look what this looks like on the display. Project, I've got this piece of wood. It's just an offcut. You can see on the other side where I've been using it to drill through, and there's some holes in it, but that doesn't matter. That's going to be the bottom. If you want to do something roughly the same size, this is about 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches. I think it may be a bit wonky, but nobody will notice that. Me and straight lines don't get on. So the first thing I'm going to do is to cover the bottom. 1, so that it doesn't scratch the surface. 2, so that it covers these holes here, and 3, so that I drilled a hole right through here, and I want to stop anything coming out of the bottom, but I wanted to make sure it was right down as deep as it could because it needs a lot of balance. So I've got some cork. I'm just going to glue this onto the top there with some Aleene's tacky glue. And then out with my knife and facing slightly inwards, I'm just going to run around the outside take the edges off. Just rounding the edge, it'll make it look much neater, and then you know no bits of cork are going to be sticking out and showing. I've got this big long piece of wire, very thick. I got this off a pick of some flowers that I took all the little bits of flowers off, and I'm just left with this wire. I thought, I'm not going to throw it away, I'll find something to do with it, and I have. Now, one of the problems with this is another one of those tall things, so it's not going to be easy to see everything I do. So I'm going to squirt lots of hot glue into the hole, and then some hot glue onto the end of this wire and poke it in. I've got these sticks, I pre-cut them to the right length, so they're bits of driftwood, and halfway exactly in each one I drilled a hole. I've got them varying in sizes right the way up. I'll see if I can pull them over. Oops, in one piece, there we go. But the problem is, if I put these straight on, they're going to be right at the bottom, and I don't want that. You can if you want to, but I don't want to. So I've got these little bits of twig that I've cut to exactly the right length, and I'm going to glue these all around the bottom of the tree to make a little bit of a trunk effect. I have chosen bits of driftwood from, let's measure the size, about 11.5 inches, right the way up to the smallest, which is just over 2 inches, and just make them in a sort of Christmassy tree shape. And then going from your longest to your shortest, measure, drill the holes halfway, and then thread them onto your thick, sturdy wire. Decide which direction I want it facing, which is that way, and then a little bit of hot glue to glue it into place. Then the next one. A bit of hot glue. Mine were a bit out of order, so I've just replaced that one with the right one, and then put that one back on. And then just work your way right up the length of the tree. So first thing I'm going to do is glue these twigs together in twos. It's a lot easier if you've got very straight twigs. I haven't. My tree is going to be very rustic. If you're hoping for something less rustic, then you can just buy yourself some dowels from the shop that'll be all a uniform size and build it with that. I'm quite fancying the rustic look for this one. So now I've joined those bits together. I've got this cork. I'm going to put the smooth side down and then glue these to the cork. Trying to keep them roughly even in a star formation. And now I'm going to glue this little piece of orange slice, dried orange slice, onto the front. And it doesn't matter that that's a bit uneven because so is my orange slice. I want the flat bit as flat as possible to make as much contact as possible with the wire that I'm sticking that side onto. So now a nice big blob of hot glue. You could make these and put them on the Christmas tree with a bit of hanging ribbon if you wanted to. That would look pretty too. So now our tree has cooled and it is looking quite good, but we need to fix the star. So I'm going to glue the star, or the bottom half of it, onto the little piece of wire that's sticking up, which should be enough to balance it. And there we go. Now all that's left is a little bow. I'm using this ribbon again. I love this. It's just a piece of fabric torn into strips, so it's lovely and frayed on the edges. And then do a 2-loop bow. Because it's single-sided, you need to turn that middle bit around and then tighten it. This bit I had from my last project. I'm just going to wrap this around the bottom of the tree there to make it look like it's been tied around. Putting the joint at the front, because that way then you're going to hide it with your bow. Decide how long you want your bow tails to be. I think about there. And then glue the bow in place. Now I think that looks gorgeous. It's so rustic, even down to the big star on the top. Everything looks old-fashioned, farmhouse, rustic. I think it's lovely. Let's have a look what this looks like up on my display. if you've enjoyed watching the craft that I've made today, I'll put a link up there of other craft videos I've made relating to Christmas, and it would be great if you could subscribe, and that way you'll see the rest of my Christmas in July videos and also all the other craft videos I make throughout the year. I'll see you all next time, but until then, don't forget, have fun! Bye!